Hi, welcome back. So this app is looking pretty good. We're just going to do a couple just minor cleanup things here for mobile. So whenever you make an app, you always need to know, hey, what does it look like on mobile? The way you switch to mobile is you click on this little icon here. Sometimes it is a little stubborn about like actually reloading to like give you a real look of what it looks like. I think that it won't quite look like what it shows here. It won't look great, but you can click on refresh and you can click on other places until it looks like what you think. I guess this is what it looks like. So you can see that it doesn't look great on mobile. You know, you can kind of scroll around here, which is kind of a weird thing. So let's just go see if we can do a little bit of cleanup for mobile. So the first thing I want to do is, it says rows routing and home, but the word rows routing takes up a lot of space. And I don't really need that word on mobile. So I'm just going to get rid of it. It's kind of a non-essential thing. I didn't mind having it, but now that I'm running out of space, I kind of want it gone. So rows routing. So here's what I'm going to do. So first I'm going to stick it in a span. And that's just so I can kind of reference it as a whole. And I'm going to use a little flex layout magic. And so flex layout, if you were to go over to your flex layout information, so you could go to the setup area. And the setup area would be a good way that you can get to the API. We could go ahead and make a link to the API, I guess, as well. So here's the API documentation. And you can see that there's a couple. There's like a static and a responsive API. And so really it's the static API that I wouldn't mind having a reference to. What the heck, I'll go ahead and put it on here. So this is the Flex Layout docs. So now it's in my drop down as well. So I've got the docs over here. And so there's a couple things that it can do. We'll kind of worry about it later. But one of them is this show and hide, which are kind of neat. And then there's also these like responsive things you can do with show and hide, which are kind of neat. And you could come down here and you could look for things. But I'm gonna kind of show you what we're gonna type this time. But you can put like a property on and then like a dot when to do it. So here's what we're gonna do. So this title, I want to set a rule to where it hides on extra small. And I also, if I'm hiding the title, I don't really need the stretching. And so I'm going to also set it to hide on extra small. So quick little trick there. And cut back over to my app here. And you can see that now they're gone, which is good, right? I still don't think it's quite showing me a valid what mobile's going to really be like, but you can see that it's better. It's got the home button here, it's got munch, and then it's got sign, and then not quite all a sign. I think that when I tested before, it actually did fit, so I'm just going to call it. I'm going to call it good enough, right? Cool. So let's go ahead and do a little bit more, and that's that our card really isn't doing what we wanted to do here. So let's go play with our card a little bit more. And one thing that I found that makes things just behave a little bit better is to wrap them in a div and go ahead and make that div part of the flex layout. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say fx layout align center center. We're going to talk about what that means. And what that does is that makes this thing use flex layouts, and then you've got a card inside of something that's using flex layout. And to be honest, things just kind of behave a little bit differently whenever they're inside of cards. Not quite sure why it isn't really showing me a genuine representation of what I'm looking at, but I'm going to keep cruising. So that was no big effect. So it just it started using flex layout things, and where that came from, like where those commands came from, is it came from the documentation, and it said that you can put a flex layout align on things, and you can specify the main axis, should it be centered, and what do you want for the cross axis. So we use center. And we're going to keep talking about this more and more, but I'm just kind of showing you a couple things as we go. Other things that are causing us problems is that there's a pretty big margin. So let's just make the margin smaller, so we don't need to really overthink that one. So let's just make it 20. And to be honest, we don't really need it on the sides because we could do the sides in a different way if we wanted. So I'm going to take it off the sides altogether, and you can see now it kind of smashes right up to the sides. And on mobile, that's probably what you want. You want all the screen real estate you can get. Now we have messed it up for non-mobile because now it smashes to the sides on non-mobile. So now we need to fix that. It's like you can't win. So let's really quickly fix the non-mobile. And what I'm going to choose to do is I'm going to choose to call this a container. So on my card here, I'm going to say class equals container. And I borrowed the word container from Bootstrap. They used to have a thing called a container, which just kind of made like styling like this easy. You can see that container doesn't do anything by default. You have to actually like make some CSS for it. And so I'll just add a rule for containers to where their width by default is 90%. And so that's going to fix it for desktop people. So now there's a little margin on there. But now mobile people are getting 90% as well, whereas mobile people might actually prefer it was genuinely pushed to the limits. And so what you can do, just to kind of show you things, is you can put on media queries. Nothing about this is Angular specific. It's just something that you can do. And so you can put in a media query with a minimum set of a certain pixel size. Let's say 1200 pixels. So this is for your pretty big monitors. And we'll just put on another rule if you're on a pretty big monitor that says the container width is a fixed width. We'll just make its width be, I don't know, I think 1152 is what I worked out. I think that came from that number times 90%, just so it's a smooth transition. And so what that'll do is on your non-desktop sites, it'll have a 90% width by default. And then as you get bigger, which I'm on a little bitty screen here, so I can't really get bigger. I can mimic bigger. It'll only have a certain size, right? All right, so we were fixing it for mobile, but you do have to be careful that when you prepare for mobile, not to mess up your desktop site. And so if I refresh here, and so I'm going to say that this is good enough. So let's go ahead and come over here and just kind of look at some of our little changes for mobile. Looks like there was a reformat that happened for one, and then just like some container width things. So little UI updates for mobile. And my real goal was just to make sure you're always thinking about desktop and mobile and making sure that things look good on both devices. That you know, whenever you make an app, that's your responsibility, right? All right, so let's go ahead and ship this guy. So in order to ship him, so right now I'm serving it locally. I think I'm content that he's done. So I'm just going to go ahead and stop it, and then I'm going to do an ng build -prod. So I kicked off an ng build -prod in one tab, and then over in the other tab, I'm going to go ahead and do a Firebase init. And what Firebase init is going to do for me is I'm going to connect it to do some hosting. So I'm going to say hosting. So I don't need database, I don't need functions. It's interesting that there's no database in this app. And with just hosting, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go select my default. So you should select default. I have already done the step where I've got more than 10 apps, so I made a new one called rows routing. So I'm going to select rows routing, but you should just scroll down until you find your default, and you can just use default. The reason I tell you to do that is because you get 10 project IDs by default, and if you stay below it, you don't have to request anymore. So if you choose default, that'll help you save you one ID, right? But I'm going to use a different ID because I don't mind running over. Directory for your public directory, that's the dist folder. Configure as a single page web app. Yes, I do want that. You got to be careful that the default is for no, so I'm going to say yes. It says the file already exists. Do you want to override it? No, I don't want to override it. The default is no, so you actually can just hit enter. And then there it did the Firebase init steps. And Firebase init, you can see that it actually wrote a couple things in here. So this is, I'm just going to say Firebase init. And then the last thing is Firebase deploy. And all Firebase deploy does is it just copies those files to Firebase, and then you can actually use your app. It tells you the URL right here, which for you will say the word default in it. And then you can replace your local host with your deployed version. And your deployed version should work just the same. So it says, welcome to the home screen of this app. Oh, and by the way, it actually is looking correctly now. And if I go to Munch 100, or I go to Munch 200, or I go to Munch L200, it's all working fine. If I say sign in, it takes me over here. So cool, if I'm taking this class for credit, I need to copy this URL. You can copy it with /home on there if you want, or however you like, and you can go turn it in. The other thing I wanted to mention just before turning you loose here is that there's also a link to the lab. And the lab is too complex for you to finish, but you could start the lab after even this one unit. And what you could do to start the lab is it's called Photo Bucket Auth, but obviously you don't know how to do auth yet. But if you go play with it, you'll notice that there are 3 different routes. There's a sign-in route, there's a main component route, and then there's a thing called the photo detail route. And so this one goes to /signin. This one just goes to the naked domain, so there is no home thing here. It's just the naked domain is the main component. And then the photo detail is going to receive a parameter called photo key. So you actually could go ahead and start this project based on the things you've learned from this app, and then you could continue building upon it. And so yours would, like, when you go to /signin, it would just say sign in works instead of saying other things. If you go to /, it would just say like main works. And then if you were to go to an individual photo, maybe it would just say photo and it would just say like whatever number you're on there. Or you could just wait and you can do it later because it's not due for a while. It's just a lab that builds up as you go. All right, so that is what we've learned about with routing. That is the end of this unit. Go get your stuff submitted and get your auth lab started, and we will see you next time for the next unit. All right, bye.